Engines roared through the quiet evening as a group of bikers sped down Main Street, their leather jackets reflecting the street lights. Their arrival was loud, confident, and clearly meant to attract attention. People on the sidewalk slowed down, watching as the gang stopped abruptly in front of a small grocery store. From the shadows, a tall man stepped forward holding a paper bag of groceries. His movements were steady, almost unusually calm for someone facing a rising confrontation. The lead biker smirked, spitting on the ground before saying, "Well, look who thinks he owns the sidewalk." The man did not react. He simply shifted the bag slightly, revealing a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. To the onlookers, he seemed like just another older man who had picked the wrong moment to walk past a biker gang. "Move, old man," another biker yelled while revving his engine so loudly the windows of the store rattled. People backed away, whispering, expecting trouble they did not want to get involved in. But the tall man stayed where he was. His steady look on the biker seemed unreadable, which only irritated them more. The leader got off his bike, boots hitting the pavement heavily. He was a large man with a tattoo across his neck and a permanent sneer on his face. He shoved the man's shoulder hard enough to knock most people off balance. Still, the man barely shifted, only protecting the grocery bag from falling. His quietness made the gang uneasy. Someone from behind taunted, "What's wrong, Grandpa? Lost your voice?" followed by harsh laughter. The crowd tightened, expecting the moment to turn violent. Mothers brought their kids closer and a businessman muttered, "He's about to get hurt." The tall man finally spoke. His voice was low, calm, and carried more force than the bikers expected. "You should walk away." The gang exploded with laughter, thinking his calm tone meant fear. To them, he was an easy target. An older man, alone and outnumbered. None of them understood who they were provoking, because the man they were mocking was Steven Seagal. Steven stood under the street light, the grocery bag still balanced in his hand. The bread leaned against the milk, the green onions sticking out casually. The image almost seemed strange. This broad-shouldered man holding simple groceries while surrounded by a ring of bikers. Many expected him to react instantly. Anyone would. Yet Steven did not raise his hands or shout. Instead, he appeared almost unguarded, as if he wanted no fight at all. That level of calm angered the bikers even more. The leader stepped closer, squinting. "What's this? Buying dinner, Grandpa?" He grabbed the loaf of bread and threw it onto the pavement. It slid across the road and stopped at another biker's boot. The group burst into laughter. Steven's jaw tightened, but he did not bend to pick it up. His eyes just followed the leader's hand moving toward the bag again. "Oh, what's this?" the biker said, pulling out the carton of milk. He shook it proudly, then dropped it hard. It burst open, immediately spilling milk across the asphalt. The crowd gasped. Steven blinked once. His silence carried more tension than yelling ever could. Another biker reached into the bag, ripping out the green onions and snapping them in half before tossing them into the gutter. "Look at him. He doesn't even care," he shouted at the onlookers. It was a humiliating scene. A man's simple groceries, symbols of everyday life and normal dignity, were being ruined piece by piece. A child watching whispered, "Why won't they stop?" But his mother only pulled him closer. A businessman shook his head. "Pathetic. He should leave before they hurt him." Whispers spread. People assumed Steven was too old or too slow or simply unwilling to stand up for himself. Some pitied him, others judged him. No one stepped forward to help. The leader laughed, towering over Steven. He shoved the now empty bag into his chest. "That's it? Bread, milk, onions. That's all you had? Useless old man." Steven caught the empty bag, folded it neatly, and held it at his side. Still, he stayed quiet. His silence was not weakness. It was restraint. But to the crowd, it looked like a man losing his dignity with no one willing to intervene. The bikers moved in closer, encouraged by everyone's hesitation. One revved his engine, sending smoke toward Steven's face. Another tapped his shoulder and mocked, "Come on, Grandpa. Show us what you've got. Or are you scared?" Steven simply adjusted his jacket sleeves as if preparing for the cool night air. When he spoke again, his voice was soft but sharp enough to make the closest biker recoil. "You've taken enough." The laughter paused briefly. He had not raised his voice. He had not threatened them. Yet something in his tone carried weight, like danger beneath still water. The leader smirked again, misreading it as empty resistance. "Or what?" he said, stepping close enough for their chests to touch. The crowd held still. Steven's eyes shifted, not with fear but with something calm and subtly dangerous. Still, he did not move. He let them believe he had nothing left. He let the crowd think he was beaten. Because Steven Seagal knew something none of them understood. Patience was not defeat. It was simply the quiet before action. Engines continued to rumble, the vibration spreading across the pavement where the crowd gathered. Steven stood in the center holding the empty paper bag while his ruined groceries lay at his feet. Milk ran across the ground creating small white streams toward the gutter. The loaf of bread sat crumpled and dirty nearby. The bundle of onions snapped like a joke. The bikers laughed even louder, proud of their cruelty. Yet what made the moment hurt more was not the gang's taunts. It was the silence of everyone else. People watched. Dozens of them. They had phones in their pockets, voices ready in their throats, and bodies able to move. But no one stepped forward. A man in a business suit muttered to his coworker, "That guy is foolish. He should have moved aside. Why stand in their way?" The coworker nodded while adjusting his tie, like the whole situation was an inconvenience and not an injustice. A young couple whispered together. The girl tugged her boyfriend's arm. "Come on, let's leave. I do not want to see this." Yet both kept watching, their curiosity stronger than their conscience. Near the curb, a teenager lifted his phone, pretending to text, though the faint glow of his camera betrayed him. He smirked as he caught the milk splashed across Steven's boots. "This will go viral," he whispered, already imagining likes and shares. The harshest words came from a middle-aged woman standing behind the crowd. She shook her head and spoke loud enough for many to hear. "The man is too proud. He asked for it. These gangs do not trouble people unless those people deserve it." Her words moved through the crowd like a poisonous excuse, giving everyone permission to stay frozen and do nothing. Steven Seagal remained silent. His shoulders steady, his expression unreadable. The bikers relied on the stillness of the crowd. Each laugh grew bolder, each shove more careless. The leader paced in front of Steven like a wolf circling prey, his boots stamping the cracked pavement. "Nobody is coming to help you, old man," he said with a smirk. "You hear that?" He lifted his arms toward the onlookers. Anyone want to step in?" The silence that followed said everything. No voice, no movement, not even a cough. The leader grinned and leaned closer, his tone a low growl meant only for Steven. "They are not with you. They are with us. They know power when they see it." The gang roared in agreement, engines revving, smoke rising. The scent of fuel mixed with spilled milk and crushed bread. A small boy tugged his mother's hand, eyes wide. "Why is no one helping him, Mama?" he asked, his voice shaking. The mother bit her lip and pulled him behind her legs. "Because it is dangerous," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes. Steven glanced briefly at the boy, just for a second. A silent acknowledgement. His expression softened, then hardened again. The bikers did not notice. They were lost in their own performance, the crowd feeding their pride. To them, Steven Seagal was already beaten and humiliated. Another biker stepped forward and grabbed the empty paper bag from Steven's hand. He crushed it and tossed it into the milk puddle with a laugh. "That is it. That is what you are now. Trash." The crowd gasped but still stayed still. Whispered comments grew sharper. "Why does he not fight back? Maybe he is scared. Maybe he is weak. He looks strong but he is useless." Every careless word reshaped the image of Steven, not as he was but as they chose to see him. A helpless man mocked by wolves, ignored by the herd. Yet through it all, Steven Seagal stood like stone, silent, patient, unmoved. The leader leaned in again, close enough that his breath brushed Steven's face. "No one will save you, and after we finish here you will wish you never stepped outside tonight." The crowd shivered. The bikers laughed. The night grew colder. And still the man in the center did not raise a hand. Not yet. He waited and watched, letting the silence set the stage. For when the moment came, everyone, bikers, bystanders, whisperers, and doubters, would understand exactly who they had underestimated. The laughter of the bikers echoed through the night, mixed with the rumble of engines and the restless murmur of the crowd. Steven Seagal stood perfectly still at the center. His groceries ruined his dignity, mocked his silence, taken for weakness. But then something shifted. It was subtle. No dramatic movement, no sudden shout. It was the way Steven rolled his shoulders back, loosening them like a predator stretching before a strike. His hands flexed at his sides, fingers moving as if testing invisible lines of energy. Most people missed it, but not everyone. The young boy who had asked why no one helped stared wide-eyed. "Mama," he whispered, tugging her sleeve. "Look at his hands." The mother frowned, not understanding. To her, Steven looked unchanged, quiet, still steady. But the child saw something different. The leader of the bikers did not notice either. He was too focused on puffing out his chest, feeding on the crowd's fear. "See this," he shouted, pointing at Steven like he was a trophy. "This is what happens when you do not respect us. This is what happens when you get in our way." The gang cheered in approval. Steven lowered his gaze to the spilled milk spreading across the asphalt. He stared at it for a moment, almost thoughtful, before lifting his eyes to the men around him. There was no anger, no fear, just calm, a dangerous type of calm. One biker standing closest began to shift uneasily. Something in Steven's eyes unsettled him. "Boss," he muttered. "You sure about this guy?" The leader scoffed, hitting his shoulder. "He is nothing. Look at him. He has not even moved." But cracks of doubt were forming. The tension grew thick, stretching like a tight bow. Each second of silence, each unmoving breath grew heavier. The crowd leaned and caught between fear and curiosity. Something was coming. They could all feel it. Steven slowly adjusted the cuff of his jacket, pulling it back just enough to reveal a bit of fabric. A belt dark as night wrapped around his waist. It was not meant to impress, not meant to shock. It was just a glimpse, a quiet truth. Most missed it, but the biker closest did not. His laughter stopped at once as his eyes widened. "Wait," he stammered, pointing with an unsteady finger. "Boss, look at his waist." The leader frowned and turned his head. For a brief moment he spotted it, a narrow strip of black cloth tied firmly and hidden under layers of clothing. His smirk slipped for a second before he forced a laugh to cover it. "A belt, that is all?" he shouted to the crowd. "He thinks a karate belt will protect him. That stuff is for kids." The gang laughed again, though the sound was tighter now. The people watching also felt the shift. A few murmured quietly. "Was that a black belt?" someone asked. "Karate?" another whispered. The rumor spread quickly. A little boy tugged at his mother. "Mama, he is trained. He is not weak." She hushed him, though even she looked uneasy now. The leader noticed the change in the crowd and clenched his jaw. He could not let doubt build. He stepped forward and jabbed a finger into Steven's chest. "I do not care what belt you hide under there," he said sharply. "Tonight you are nothing." Steven lifted his head slowly. His voice was low, steady, controlled. "You made a mistake." The words hung in the air. The laughter died completely. Engines lowered to a soft rumble. People leaned in, sensing a shift they could not explain. Steven took one step forward, not threatening, just calm, yet it seemed to weigh more than any biker boot on the pavement. His presence filled the street in a way no one expected. The leader forced a laugh, though it broke halfway. "Oh yeah, big talk for someone with no backup." "I do not need backup," Steven replied. Silence wrapped around the street. Even the crowd held their breath. Everyone felt something building, though no one knew what it would be. Deep down, the bikers began to understand the truth. They were not chasing a victim. They had cornered someone far more capable. The engines quieted further. The crowd froze. The bikers' confidence cracked, their smiles turning uneasy. At the center stood Steven Seagal. He barely moved except for a small step and a light adjustment of his jacket, yet that alone shifted the entire scene. Calm, steady, certain. The leader tried to regain control. "Enough of this," he shouted. "Someone teach this old man a lesson." One biker revved his engine, then stepped off with a smirk. He cracked his knuckles, towering over Steven. "You should have gone home with your groceries, Grandpa," he said. People braced, expecting Steven to be knocked down, but the opposite happened. The biker threw a heavy punch meant to end the fight quickly. Steven's hand moved first, precise, controlled. He caught the wrist midair. The crowd gasped. The biker's shock grew as Steven tightened his grip, forcing the arm into a lock. With a smooth motion, Steven twisted the wrist and flipped him off balance. The man hit the pavement hard. Silence. The crowd struggled to process what they saw. One moment the biker had control. The next he was on the ground in pain. Steven released him and stood upright, calm and unchanged. The leader's face hardened. "Do not just stand there," he yelled. "Get him." Two bikers rushed from opposite sides. Steven stayed composed. The first swung wildly. Steven ducked easily and drove his elbow into the man's ribs with accurate force. The man collapsed, breath knocked out. The second tried to tackle Steven from behind. Without even turning fully, Steven shifted, stepped aside and hooked his foot behind the man's ankle. The biker stumbled and hit the ground face first. Phones came out. The crowd burst into reactions. A moment that looked like an easy humiliation had turned into something completely different. The leader's confidence broke. His group was falling one by one. Another biker yanked a chain from his belt and rushed forward, yelling. Steven stepped toward the attack instead of backing away. The chain swung wide, but Steven intercepted the biker's wrist, twisted it, and the chain dropped to the ground. Steven struck the man's chest with an open palm, sending him backward into his own motorcycle. Gasps rose from the crowd. Someone whispered, "That was skill. He knows exactly what he is doing." Whispers grew into a clear understanding, black belt martial arts trained. But the bikers pushed forward, driven by pride. Four circled Steven, now moving carefully like men unsure but unwilling to retreat. Steven shifted slightly, one foot back, hands raised just enough, calm, focused. He watched them not with fear but with the steady awareness of someone who had seen every move before it happened. The first lunged. Steven stepped aside, guiding the momentum past him, then struck the back of the biker's knee. The man dropped instantly. The second attacked from behind. Steven pivoted, blocked with a sharp motion, then delivered a quick strike to the neck. The biker staggered. The third charged low. Steven lowered his weight and brought his elbow down onto the man's back, sending him to the ground. The fourth froze. He watched 3 of his friends fall in seconds. Steven's eyes met his calm, controlled, direct. The biker backed away, shaking his head. "Not me. I am done," he muttered, heading for his bike. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Others were simply stunned. Steven stood there without even breathing hard. The leader's face twisted with anger and disbelief. His men, the same ones who mocked moments earlier, were now scattered across the pavement, groaning and crawling away. Steven straightened his jacket, his voice sharp and steady. "I told you made a mistake." The leader's jaw tightened. He reached under his vest and drew a knife, the metal catching the streetlight. "You think this is over?" he growled. "I'll show you what happens to anyone who crosses us." The crowd gasped again, tension spreading through them. Some looked away, unsure of what would follow. But Steven stayed completely still. His eyes moved from the blade to the man holding it, calm, steady, unshaken. The storm had arrived and the real confrontation was starting. The streetlight reflected off the knife as the leader snapped it open. The crowd reacted together. Mothers pulling their kids back, people stepping toward doorways, phones lifting to record everything. "Think you're tough, old man?" The leader barked, anger shaking his voice. "Let's see how tough you are against this." The knife flashed in his grip as he lunged straight toward Steven Seagal's chest. Steven didn't panic. He didn't blink. With a speed no one expected, his hand shot forward and caught the man's wrist mid-thrust. Gasps spread through the crowd. The blade froze inches from his chest as if time itself halted. The leader tried to force the knife forward, but Steven's grip was immovable. With controlled precision, Steven twisted the wrist outward, sending the man off balance. The knife dropped to the pavement, spinning until it stopped near the crowd. A young man stepped on it and kicked it away. Cheers erupted. But Steven wasn't done. The leader threw a desperate swing with his free hand. Steven ducked and countered with a clean elbow to the ribs. The man folded forward, coughing as the air left his lungs. Steven guided him downward with control rather than force, locking his arm behind him in a firm joint hold. The engines that once roared behind the gang were silent now. The men who moments ago looked unstoppable were scattered on the ground. The leader lay pinned, his face pressed to the cold asphalt, his arm locked helplessly behind him. Steven leaned down, his voice low but clear. "You chose violence. Now live with the consequences." The leader winced, his confidence gone. "All right. Enough," he shouted, his voice breaking. The crowd moved closer, fear shifting into energy. Some clapped, others cheered, and a few shouted encouragement. Phones flashed, capturing the gang leader humbled by the very man he had mocked. Steven released the hold and pushed the leader back. The man fell to his knees, gasping, sweat dripping down his face. His weapon was gone. His men were defeated. His reputation crumbled in front of everyone. Steven straightened his jacket again, breathing steady and composed. He hadn't lost control once. The leader looked up, shame and anger mixed in his eyes. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he muttered weakly. Steven's voice stayed firm. "I don't care who you are. Respect is earned, not forced. Tonight you learned that." The crowd roared with approval. The mood shifted completely. The businessman who had doubted Steven earlier shook his head in disbelief. "I thought he was done for. He's a master." A teenager lowered his phone for a moment, stunned. "This is going to explode online," he whispered. One by one, the bikers dragged themselves to their motorcycles. Their engines started again, no longer powerful but weak and retreating. None of them looked back. Even their leader crawled toward his bike, his arrogance broken. Steven didn't chase them. He didn't have to. Justice wasn't revenge, it was balance. And tonight, balance returned. The little boy who had watched everything tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mama," he saved himself. He didn't even get scared. She nodded, eyes wide. "He's not just anyone," she whispered. As the final motorcycle faded into the night, the crowd turned their eyes back to Steven, not with pity now but with respect. Steven bent to pick up the ruined loaf of bread. It was dirty and flattened beyond use. He held it for a moment, then placed it back in the bag. His face softened for a second. Then he looked toward the boy and gave him a quiet smile. The boy grinned back and held his mother's hand tighter. Steven nodded slightly and began walking down the street as if nothing had happened. The crowd stepped aside for him, their whispers now filled with respect. Behind him, the motorcycle engines faded into silence. Justice had been served. The night air felt different, lighter. Moments ago filled with fear, now calm and relieved. People lingered, talking softly, replaying what they had just witnessed. Steven walked steadily with his grocery bag under one arm. The ruined bread didn't matter. What mattered was the dignity he carried, calm, steady, unafraid. Behind him, the boy called out, "Sir." Steven paused. He turned toward the child, who stepped forward with a small piece of paper he had been drawing on. It was a simple sketch of a stick figure standing tall against big motorcycles. The boy's cheeks turned red. This is you," he said quietly. "You're the strong man." Steven's expression softened for the first time that night. He crouched and accepted the paper with care, as if it were something precious. He nodded at the boy, an unspoken thank you. The mother gently pulled her son back, giving Steven a grateful look. No words were needed. Respect had been earned, not demanded. Around them, people began to applaud. It wasn't loud, but steady and sincere, strangers united by what they had seen. Steven tucked the drawing into his jacket and gave the crowd one last nod before walking toward the shadows. His figure faded from view, leaving behind only whispers and the memory of the night. "Mama, will he be okay?" the boy asked. She smiled softly. "He already is." And the message lingered in the air. Respect is not taken through force. It is built through discipline, strength, and dignity. Silence does not mean weakness. Being unseen does not mean powerless. Sometimes the quietest man carries the greatest strength.